The white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, folks, are just genetically predisposed to be our benevolent rulers. But with George H.W. Bush, he was the last WASP.
It's so
It was
hard.
he was like a white. He was like the last African white rhino.
Yeah.
He was the last WASP, and now there are no more.
Yeah.
And we're gonna miss them, guys.
And like a white African rhino, he was killed by Donald Trump Jr.
I'm speaking, of course, about Ross Douthat. We haven't checked in with Ross in a long time.
You know what? I've always said about Ross, because I miss him.
Of course.
I feel the way about Ross Douthat, the way that Dana White feels about, MMA fighters who aren't that good, but sort of lose or win in spectacular, exciting fashion. Ross may not be the best, but he leaves it all out there.
We haven't done a Ross column in a while, so I think this is a treat for you guys. Ross started out as a major character for us, and I think it's time to bring him back with his opinion piece to the New York Times. Why we miss the WASPs. Their more meritocratic, diverse, and secular successors rule us neither as wisely nor as well.
Diverse. So he's just complaining that there aren't as many white people in the ruling class anymore.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, cool. Good to know.
Well, as we know from Ross's book about Harvard, Asians, they may be smart.
They're weird.
But they're very cliquish and inscrutable.
It's very Deadwood, yeah.
It's very hard.
These Celestials.
It's like when we're ruled by the meritocratic Asians, because they're the best at taking tests and doing math and whatnot. When we're ruled by the Asian ruling class, they may be competent, but again, it's very hard to scrute.
Yeah.
What do they want from us?
This eternal mystery.
Damn, I try to screw this shit and I can't. I just love that it's like a cut scene of Steve from Deadwood.
Yeah.
They're in their clique and they won't let a Harvard man.
So this is what Ross Douthat has to say in defense of our WASP ruling class. The good old days in America.
Yeah.
We just came from Princeton. Wasn't it better?
Oh, my God, yes.
Everyone, like the graduating class of Princeton, Harvard, and Yale.
When we were ruled by the Dulles brothers, the Niles and Fraser Crane of
war
the
crimes and
military-industrial
genocide,
complex.
We used to be ruled by a different type of cousin guy. It was, you would be like, instead of, my cousin fucked Betty Page, it was like, oh, my cousin knocked over 3 governments in Latin America for a fruit company. But you were telling the truth.
The WASP cousin guys were just guys that fucked their cousins.
Yo, no shit. Me and my cousin came all over each other. We don't even need a woman.
Okay, so this is what Ross says. The nostalgia flowing since the passing of George H.W. Bush has many wellsprings. Admiration for the World War II generation and its dying breed of warrior politicians.
I love warrior politics. Oh, yeah. Just a bunch of William Wallaces.
Yeah, I think of warriors. I think of fucking George H.W. Bush.
The usual belated media affection for moderate Republicans. The contrast between the elder Bush's foreign policy successes and the failures of his son. And the contrast between any honorable politician and the current occupant of the Oval Office.
All right, for the beginning, we can just... this is one of those ones where you just destroy it out of the gate because he says we, and he never defines that, and he's talking, whoa, all these outpourings. Who? It's all the media.
Well,
the media are the only people who give a shit about this.
Well, I think the funny thing to point out is that Ross Douthat is 100% a WASP.
Well, yeah, he is.
I don't take
He's very proud of it.
Well, I mean, he has his phony religious conversion to his Catholicism, which is like, that's his one, check mark against it, but I don't really take that seriously. So he's just like, it was better when people like me from Connecticut ran the country.
Yeah, no, he's dressing it in the idea that he's commenting on this national wellspring of nostalgia, which, I'm sorry, entirely the media, maybe like a third of Democratic voters, because they are on that civility shit and they are so traumatized by Trump that they want any Republican they can kind of grasp onto and think this person's better than Trump. So that's true. But I'd say the majority of Democratic voters are lukewarm to disdainful of him. Obviously, people who don't vote don't give a fuck who that guy was. Who's that fucking grandpa, that old bitch? And then half of the fucking Republican base thinks that he killed Kennedy.
Well, he probably did. But 2 of the more critical takes on Bush nostalgia got closer to the heart of what was being mourned in distant hindsight with his death. Writing in The Atlantic, Peter Beinart described the elder Bush as the last president deemed legitimate by both our country's warring tribes, before the age of presidential sex scandals, plurality winning and popular vote losing chief executives, and white resentment of the first black president. Didn't George H.W. Bush like cheat on Barbara all the time?
He was a huge horn dog.
He was a coxman.
He was a massive cheater all the time. In fact, it came out during the, I believe, the 88 campaign, but it just never caught any kind of larger thing because you didn't have somebody like Jennifer Flowers who was giving interviews or something. But he was absolutely a known cheater to the Washington press corps. And of course, talk about racial resentment. Fucking Willie Horton had. Him and Lee Atwater ran an explicitly racist campaign in 1988.
Also, in the Atlantic, Franklin Four. Franklin Four.
Just a motherfucker wrote an article in the New York Times basically to respond to Peter Beinart and Franklin Four. What? Well, this is the most.
Okay, I'm just gonna call him.
What? This isn't exciting.
I'm gonna call him Franklin.
It's just what are we doing? What are they doing?
I'm calling him Franklin Hooer. Franklin Hooer described the
He's
subtext.
more like Franklin 8, if you feel me.
Franklin
What,
Hooer.
Franklin Four? What, New Republic, right? Is he still in the New
Yeah,
Republic?
no, the Atlantic.
Oh, the Atlantic. Okay.
It's literally the same thing.
Describe
It's all the same money laundering operation for the fucking Church of Scientology and the fucking Qatari royal family.
described the subtext of Bush nostalgia as a fondness for a bygone institution known as the establishment. Hardened.
Who?
Them.
I mean, like, but who is having this bygone nostalgia?
Me?
Name names.
Felix.
Me. I am, dude.
Felix.
Give me something other than these fucking preppy dickheads.
Me, dude. I'm sad.
Can I just describe the establishment, how Franklin Hooer describes them? The establishment are people who are hardened in the cold New England boarding school.
No, dude. Stop it. You can't use that word.
Yo, my man literally said they got hard in New England boarding schools.
They were ritually molested. That's what he means.
I got dumb brain at Exeter.
Hardened.
No, he means they got ritually molested. It's the same. They imported the British ruling class style.
I don't know how much identically they like Andover and Exeter copied exactly the British boarding school system, but they also said acculturated by the late night rituals of Skull and Bones, sent off to the world with a sense of noblesse oblige.
All
which
right,
literally
my friends have jacked off on me enough, and now I feel honored to serve the
He's
world.
talking about a childhood of separation from your family and ritual humiliation by your peers. And that's supposed to make you a good leader and not a lizard-brained psychopath?
and that's how you overthrow the our Benz for the United Fruit Company.
Mossadegh?
Yeah.
I was thinking of Geronimo's skull when we overthrew Mossadegh.
Put simply, Americans miss Bush because we miss the WASPs.
Once again, no. Every time he says that, I say, fuck you. Who says we miss him?
Hooer suggests that this nostalgia is mostly bunk, since the WASPs were often bigots, since their cultivation of noblesse oblige was really about preserving a place at the high table of American life, and since so many of their virtues are superficial, a matter of dressing nicely while practicing imperialism or writing lovely thank you notes while they outsource the dirty work of politics to race-baiting operatives.
Correct.
However, one of the lessons of the age of meritocracy is that building a more democratic and inclusive ruling class is harder than it looks, and even perhaps a contradiction in terms.
You think?
How about we just get rid of the ruling class and replace it with another class?
I don't
maybe a working class of some
I don't know.
kind?
There's like a different class that could be in charge, maybe. I don't know. I'm not sure.
You can get rid of the social registers and let women into your secret societies and privilege SATs over recommendations from the rector of Justin.
Which, by the way, they have not done. These motherfuckers
and the
are
headmaster
still,
of St. Grottlesex.
These guys are still the ones who get into these schools anyway.
And
even
George
with all
Bush
this.
did go to Harvard.
Yeah.
And you still end up with something that is clearly a self-replicating upper class, a powerful elite filling your schools and running your public institutions.
Yeah.
Weird how that works.
I know.
If only there was some sort of
God.
thinker that sort of described how a
situation.
class-based system of power works and replicates itself such that it actually doesn't matter if it's a WASP in charge or some sort of, weirdo Catholic convert.
Yeah. Sort of like how all class societies are a dictatorship of one class over the other. And ours is one where, what are they called? Starts with a B. They're the ones. And they are a class dictatorship. And that expresses itself in economics and then somehow also in the political class.
We're talking about Jay Sakai, right?
Yeah.
That's the author?
Yeah. Google settlers.
So if some of Elder Bush's mourners wish we still had a WASP establishment, their desire probably reflects a belated realization that certain of the old establishment's vices were inherent to any elite, that meritocracy creates its own forms of exclusion, and that the WASPs had virtues that their successors have failed to inherit or revive. Those virtues included, again, the spirit of noblesse oblige and a personal austerity and piety that went beyond the thank you notes and boat shoes and prep school chapel going. No, it didn't.
Wrong.
It absolutely did not.
Where is his citation, motherfucker? Citation needed. When you're putting your cigar out on your fucking saddle boy's fucking forehead.
A spirit that trained the most privileged children for service, not just success, that sent men like Bush into combat alongside the sons of farmers and mechanics in the same way. He was a fucking Air Force officer. He was not alongside the sons of farmers and mechanics. He was not,
and he picked it because he thought it would be a great adventure.
He said the Knights of the Sky.
The Knights of the Sky.
Yeah.
It was a fun lark for a blue blood shithead.
To be fair, a lot of them did die. The death rate for those pilots. Yeah, exactly. Not enough of the officer class of the Western powers died in World War II.
That's absolutely true. No question.
Blah, blah, blah. The WASP virtues also included a cosmopolitanism that was often more authentic than our own performative variety, a cosmopolitanism that coexisted with white man's burden racism, but also sometimes transcended it. Again, when?
You're just saying it.
Because for every Brahmin bigot, there was an Arabist or China hand or Hispanophile. Well, there was another.
What's up?
There was another one of those files.
Yeah, another file.
There's another file.
Wait a minute. So he's saying that they weren't racist. They were things like Arabists. Yeah, you mean those freaks who would just wear a turban and put phyllo dough on their dick and fuck somebody on a Turkish rug?
Oh, dude, you think I'm racist? I literally only pay 13-year-olds of this specific ethnicity to go pee-pee on me in a tent.
He goes, they understood the non-American world better than some of today's shallow multiculturalists. So Ross is like,
have you ever been pissed on, buddy?
He's literally talking about a Lawrence of Arabia figure, like a guy who's administering imperialism and started dressing like a Bedouin.
Yeah,
and he actually understood their culture a lot better than a lot of these woke people today who actually won't fuck a teenage boy.
Yeah, I mean.
Have you ever paid an Iranian bodybuilder to do a riot so you could overthrow their president?
Excuse me. Have you ever had Latin 10th generation syphilis that breaks when you're 25 and you just walk around in an outfit and going, I fancy myself a son of Siam? Does that ever happen to you? You can study as much as you want, but until you do that, dude.
What were their fucking accomplishments? What did this worldliness accomplish? Coups and dictatorships that have created every fucking problem we have now that he's bemoaning our current elite can't handle. They're all legacies of these motherfuckers from the Central American dictatorships that have given birth to the dreaded caravan and immigrant issues, to the Middle East being turned into just a giant fucking war zone. That's all their fucking doing. They were the ones who bequeath all of this to us.
So like Ross talks about, some of the problems in, WASP habits or whatever, but here's where we really enter his mind palace. And he goes, it's possible to imagine adaptation rather than surrender as a different WASP strategy across the 60s and 70s. In such a world, the establishment would still have admitted more blacks, Jews, Catholics, and Hispanics, and more women to its ranks, but it would have done so as a self-consciously elite crafting strategy. Dude, I love when I'm crafting elites. When I acquire items to craft a new Hispanic Jewish elite that still has plus WASP 10 noblesse oblige stats.
God damn, the Japanese Indian elite is the hardest item to find in the game.
So wait a minute.
Complete so many quests.
So basically, he's saying the problem is that not enough people from different backgrounds were brought to these institutions as kids to have their bare asses paddled with a plank from Nathan Hale's gallows.
Whoa, I'm a fucking Arabist over here. I'm getting the fucking pee-pee on me from all these 13-year-old Bedouin boys. It's like bada bing, I give him the coin, bada boom. I'm covered in child urine. Yeah, I have inbreeding caused mental illness.
At the same time, it would have retained both its historic religious faith, instead of exchanging Protestant rigor for a post-Christian social gospel and soft pantheism. Again, this is just all of Ross's own fucking boogeymen that the elite now.
Fucking pantheists. I'm just
there's
sick.
Nobody is a fucking
I'm fucking sick of seeing Kamala Harris praying to the fucking snow god.
This is
every December 1st.
This is like Alex Jones shit. This is they're worshiping Baal. Shut up, dude.
And it's more,
Oh my god, I got invited to the DCCC's Walpurgisnacht party. It fucking sucks.
Oh my god,
He
I
goes-
have to meet Tom Perez at Stonehenge.
So he's saying like
Sucks.
he's doing a character build where you could like trade WASP DNA for WASP social characteristics like Protestant rigor and their self-denying culture, which is just like, again, like that's where you shake, Felix, like you said, you shake your wife's hand on your wedding night and then don't talk to her or make eye contact for 30 years, and you lose your lips actually are surgically removed from your skull, and that you just sort of drink gin and pee blood for the rest of your life.
Yeah, it's good, dude. It's good. It makes you a good person.
And he goes, the goal would have been to keep piety and discipline embedded in the culture of a place like Harvard, rather than the mix of performative self-righteousness and raw ambition that replaced them. Ross, you wrote a book about your time at Harvard that was all about your performative self-righteousness and raw ambition.
He is quoted as saying he wants to be America's richest writer when he
he's
was
the
going to
richest in
Harvard.
And
thought.
I'm sorry, what is all his religious bullshit if not performative self-righteousness?
Yeah, that's every column of his.
Such an effort might also have had a spillover effect on politics. It's de rigueur for liberals to lament the decline of the Rockefeller Republicans, or the
I don't.
or the compromises that moderate Northeastern WASP like George H.W. Bush made with Sunbelt populism. But a WASP establishment that couldn't muster the self-confidence to hold on to Harvard and Yale was never likely to maintain its hold on a mass political organization like the GOP. Whereas an establishment that still believed in its mission within its own ivied bastions might have been seen as a more politically imposing in the wider world, instead of seeing its last paladin, a war hero and statesman in a grand American tradition, dismissed in the boomer era as a wimp.
That is absolute pharmaceutical grade gibberish. He is saying that the rise of the populist right that started in the 60s with Goldwater would have somehow been stopped if there'd been sort of a hybrid vigor infused WASP establishment to fight it. I can't even form words at this point. I mean, what do you think politics is? Like, what do you really think is the driving factor? Is it there's no place in any of this for just the material reality of like the shifts of American the economy and where power flowed with the rise of the energy economy of Texas or whatever, the way that shifted financial influence from the East Coast financiers to the West. Like, that has nothing to do with how many people in DC can lift their fucking pinky finger when they're drinking tea. I mean, these are titanic material shifts, and that is what determines the political superstructure. He has this perfectly inverted understanding of politics where it's just the need for WASPs to be imposing enough would keep the rest of us rabble in line.
I mean, I think the entire point of this column is that it's just like a giant what if scenario. That what if when I went to college, it was still cool to be a WASP, and I was as successful as Mark Zuckerberg by channeling all of my college age anxieties into something other than some weird religious mania and New York Times columns.
Yeah, instead of part of the pantheistic, sun worshipping, multicultural elites we got at the Ivy League,
Yeah.
Ross could have been accepted by the WASP, and he could have been the next Zuckerberg, except he makes Tinder that connects 28-year-old virgins to 13-year-old boys in Western Asia, as it is now called.
What if, hear me out now, what if the neoliberal turn hadn't happened and just atomized and dissolved all social bonds and radical and made politics vastly more populist because people were much more desperate through basically all strata of society except for his precious little grouping. Ugh, Jesus fucking Christ.
What if there's a special type of white person that wore 17 layers to have afternoon gin with his wife and has sex with her once, and it produces 7 awful kids all named Neil?
I mean, he goes on to, he's just saying we should learn from the best things of the WASPs, which was, all of the democratic governments that they overturned and all the incest and repression that they
It's
also
amazing
did.
that he can't muster a single example in that entire article about what actually was good about them being in charge, other than just broad values.
What he means is
about.
like what was good about them being in charge is that like they reflected things that Ross likes to see, which is like never enjoying yourself.
Yeah.
And like being sort of like austere in both personality and repressed lunatic.
Yeah.
While you're, like I said, overthrowing democratic governments all over the world. He goes on to quote an essay from something called the Hedgehog Review, which I'm not going to read, but he just says, if we would learn from their lost successes in our own era of misrule, reconsidering, again, what were their successes? I'm not clear from reading
Not
this
a
article.
single example.
Reconsidering this idea that a ruling class should acknowledge itself for what it really is and act accordingly might be a fruitful place to start. I think a fruitful place to start would be recognizing who the ruling class is and getting rid of them entirely.
Well, that's the thing, and that's what's always frustrating about Douthat columns is because he's pointing out that there is a real contradiction there, and that the diversity solution to the perceived problem of a out of touch ruling class is in fact not one, because you're just replacing one ruling class with another, and that the contradictions are still there, and that as long as and especially in an era when material conditions are deteriorating and where politics has basically stopped any pretense of being able to control the economic destinies of people, we're basically throwing our hands up and said, look, we'll be your rulers, but we can't actually make anything better. Everything's to the markets to decide. Sorry about that. That is an unsustainable situation, and that's going to get swept away. And he kind of has this vague understanding that that's the case, but because he is a fucking deluded dipshit, he just can't grasp it. So instead he's like, well, what if we just went back in time and had made sure killed Jeb Bush and replaced him with a more competent version of himself so that he could have beaten Trump in 2016, and then everything would be okay.
I mean, I think it just comes down to like Ross is a WASP, but he'll never really be a part of them. But like he wants, he views himself as an outsider because of his weird religious mania. But he still wants to be part of. He wants to fuck Geronimo's skull.
Well, the thing is that he probably fucking affects that Catholicism partially to create an aura of being an outsider, because that gives him that's a it's self-regarding, because to be sort of part of this elite, you're a fucking Wodehouse character, but if you have some weird thing off, you don't want to be Gatsby, you want to be Nick Carraway, right? And that he gets to be part of it, but also have self-awareness and a separation from it and an irony that makes him more interesting than just these boring WASPs.
It's almost like a shallow, I don't know, what's the form of politics that's like based on who you are,
right,
or
yeah.
like something like your driver's license, your ID,
ID, yeah,
your identity
politics. That's what it is. Yeah, identity politics. Meanwhile, I would rather be ruled by literal, actual WASPs, right? Giant interdimensional space WASPs that had us all work in the sugar caves than these motherfuckers again.
I would rather have that wasp from Mandy sting my neck after LSD is dropped into my eyes.
Well, yeah, that just looked like fun.
Actually, that looked pretty dope, actually.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm going to be doing every time Ross Douthat writes a column. Let's talk about another New York Times columnist. He's favorite of the show. Legend. Goat. Ross.
Yeah.
Ross.
The greatest man to ever put on the op-ed jersey.
Raising that jersey to the rafters. Ross Douthat.
He doesn't look as young as Brett Stevens, but he actually is much younger.
He's far younger, yeah.
He's far younger.
Well, I mean, Brett Stevens, though, one of the reasons he is so anti-Iran is that a Persian wizard put a curse on him when he was young, so he's always going to look well.
And he's been cursed to lick a big lolly wherever he goes.
Brett Stevens has been...
Imagine my surprise when the tolerant left put me in a child sailor outfit.
Knocked off my pinwheel hat.
Yeah. Spun the propeller on my cap.
Ross was getting horny today. Did you guys see that?
Oh, hell yeah. That's what we want to talk about.
We'll get to that. The setup for this is Ross, and again, this column speaks exactly to this mentality and to Ross's utter cowardice as a fucking writer. He wrote an article last week in the Sunday opinion section titled, "Is there a case for Le Pen?" Ross just write the op-ed piece, The Case for Le Pen, okay?
Yeah.
Why this fucking demure attitude, right? We all know who you're rooting for, Ross, but he has to play footsie with the only people who like really take him seriously are his deluded liberal readers who think that they're like, I'm feeding my mind. I'm feeding my mind a diverse cast of vegetables and opinions.
Yeah. Good sir, would you go to the greatest banquet in the world and only eat dessert?
The piece itself is not even worth reading from. I mean, like, as soon as you saw that title, Ross, just make the case for fucking Le Pen. Have some fucking balls. This is your job. This is what you get paid 6 figures to do. And he was just, he had in it. He seems to be like, the best line in it actually is he said, Marine Le Pen was, instrumental in distancing, the Front National from the more, strident anti-Semitism and open fascism of her father. And he says, of course, they are positioning for votes. And I just love that of course in there. That's always a tell. Or it's just like, of course they're doing that. That should be taken into consideration. It's like as if you would have a problem with any of their open anti-immigrant.
To be sure. It's a to be sure.
Yeah, to be sure. Yeah. And he's like, and he also mentions that many of her anti-immigrant racist views are quite common in French politics, so it's hard to single her out. And it's just like, well, if everybody's doing it,
why not?
In a way, it's not bad. So Ross is an utter coward, of course, but Matt, of course, was referring to. This amazing tweet today from Ross that I think is actually the most grotesque thing he's ever written.
God.
And this surpasses even the Chunky Reese Witherspoon incident or any of the just soul-shatteringly embarrassing moments from Privilege. Douthat, NYT, today, 5/3/17, 4:34 p.m.
Remember, there's context. He was live tweeting the French presidential debates like an asshole.
One-handedly.
Scintillating, yeah. Ross writes, what if Hillary had Le Pen's smoker's voice instead of her own?
What if Le Pen was 15 feet tall and she crushed me under her feet and I just got a mouthful of toe jam and she called me a little worm and rubbed my head into the carpet? What if she strapped me to a radiator and beat me with Hot Wheels tracks until a crucifix formed on my back?
Le Pen is doing breath play with the French electorate at the moment, cutting off their oxygen just enough to make things interesting. Of course, the answer to Ross, if Hillary had Le Pen's smoky Kathleen Turner voice, the answer is you'd be cranking off thinking about her and not Le Pen.
I feel great. He's just Patty and Selma. You got a van you can throw an old broad into?
I gotta go change wigs.
I'm chilling in Cedar Rapids.
I may not be the mask, but I'm smoking.
There he is.
And I love that, like, Ross is never thirsty for, like, the way, like, David Brooks is, for instance, for hot younger women.
Let me email that.
It's always for, like, these crones, like fucking Le Pen or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, he's like, what was that, a Simpsons joke where it's like, what, you don't think you don't think Eudora Wealthy is erotic? I find intellect and power sexy.
No, but sorry, Ross just had a follow-up to his "Is there a case for Le Pen" column, or like I said, if he had a fucking any editors there, the column would have just been titled "The Case for Le Pen." He follows it out that says, "In my Sunday column, I raised the possibility that a vote for Marine Le Pen in next weekend's French presidential runoff might be more defensible than a vote for Donald Trump in 2016. The internet did not agree, and perhaps neither did Le Pen herself, since she rewarded my controversial foray by immediately getting mired in a plagiarism scandal." Because it's like,
that's the worst thing you can do.
That's what's bad about her, is that she plagiarized a
When
speech.
you're a grade grubbing shithead, that is the worst.
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, that is true.
And I do like the idea that he took it personally. Like, he sent her the note that said, "Do you like me? Circle yes or no."
Mademoiselle Le Pen, the American who looks like a thumb, has endorsed you. We're going to win. Every French person loves Ross Douthat.
So yeah, I think that the point with Douthat over there again, like I said earlier, is just like, I don't know. I genuinely baffles me why anyone buys like this game he does where he plays, like I said, demure, or he like, he's just like doesn't show too much leg, in any of his columns, but like it's obviously what he believes in.
Yeah,
right?
it's like he's trying to coyly uncross his legs to show you a little bit, and a turd rolls out of his pants. That's how I would describe Ross's writing.
It's evocative.
That is quite an image.
Yeah, it's my ill-reviewed Basic Instinct remake.
It's
a little
this-
bit of a slapstick element.
Now I'm just thinking of the scene from Basic Instinct, but when she uncrosses her legs, it's just Ross's face.
Oh, I know, and I'm jacking off.
I mean, look, when do the events of Halo take place?
I don't
Hundreds
know.
of years in the future. So we have to get through a little bit of a rough patch before we're there. And this is the rough patch. We're getting through it. We're going to do it. We're
I
going to
thought the
win.
events of Halo were the rough patch.
Are you kidding me? Do you see how fucking cool they looked? Yeah, a lot of people died, but they had colonized space. The fucking Spartan armor, fucking awesome. Master Chief had a hologram that maybe he'll fuck in the next game.
We have holograms now.
Yeah, you can't fuck them. You're not friends with them.
Yeah, you can't fuck a hologram, man. Not yet.
Yeah,
You gotta get the-
this guy thinks the holograms like him. What, you think that cashier likes you because she told you the next day?
You got to get the hard light holograms, right?
Yeah.
From Star Trek. Is that a thing? Because like in the Star Trek, you could fuck the holograms, right?
Yeah.
On the Did anyone
Me and
watch
Chris
Star
have
Trek?
never seen Star Trek.
I thought Chris for sure watched Star Trek. I thought for sure you watched Star Trek.
I don't
Virgil?
really, but I know what you're talking about.
I thought you could fuck the holograms in Star Trek.
They
Oh,
have,
is that
like,
what
these-
Han Solo was?
No.
That's like this room with like a huge
Lay
simulation
troll
in it.
face. Lay troll face. Like a sir.
Matt, if you just get VR equipment, you can do that now.
You know you can't. You just look at the hologram. You'd have to still crank your own meat. As long as you're
I'm
masturbating.
sure there's a way you can sort of homebrew a system where
As
you're in a
long-
fleshlight
Well,
and it's mechanical.
There are, yeah. There's, I think that technology exists.
As long as you're masturbating, it's not. You're not. You're not interacting with the technology. In my opinion, it has to be doing it for you to actually be having sex. Call me a luddite or whatever, but if you're not actually, if your hands are involved, you're not
But
having.
no, your
sex
hands
with the
wouldn't be
technology.
involved. It's just this isn't something like Sony would sell. You'd have to, buy it.
So you're saying that right now, in the year 2018, you could jerry rig a system where you could have sex virtually without any kind of you touching yourself.
I don't think you'd have to jerry rig it. I think there are distributors of this kind of thing.
Okay, but are you talking about? Well, how do you engage the genitals?
It's a mechanical device.
Okay, we have to stop talking about this.
Yeah, why do you want to know so much about
Yeah,
this?
wow, this stopped being a bit. It's just you wanting to perfect the technology.
Go on Kickstarter. That's like every Kickstarter now.
Yeah.
Well,
Trying to make the
no,
perfect artificial clit.
no. You know why I'm asking? Not for myself. I would never be interested in this, but this is a good transition because I'm worried about people who now apparently, according to the elite media, I'm supposed to be worried about and be very sympathetic towards and want to find a solution for, and that are incels. It's a media ecology that's powered by sexual neuroses, and then someone is slightly less good at it, and you can just totally. But the thing is,
People like any hierarchy.
Right.
They're a little bit above the incels, and they're like, look, I have sex. It's
but
great.
the thing is that that's the real issue, though, is that incel is a specific thing. It's not just somebody who can't have sex. It's somebody who has turned that into a justification for their hardened misogynistic worldview that they are reinforced by through online. They're people whose disaffection and you can argue about whether it's a frustration with the fact that they aren't able to dominate women the way that they could have in previous generations, or that they're just lonelier the way everyone is in the 21st century. Either way, it starts with a sense of being unable to engage in traditional romantic relationships. And then the thing that makes them different than just a general term of someone who is romantically unfortunate or a virgin or something is somebody who then takes that frustration and then plows it into the internet and then gets into a community of similarly afflicted men who reinforce each other's worst pathologies and instincts. and then turn that into basically a worldview that is essentially nihilistic, but powered by at the heart by a misogynistic rage. What's such a trip, though, is that the reason people are talking about incels now is that one of them plowed into a bunch of people in Toronto and killed them.
Right.
In a literal ISIS-style attack. And within a week, you have people in the pages of the New York Times going, well, let us hear him out. Which I don't remember happening after the Nice attack. I don't remember any articles like, ISIS, do they have a point? Should the great Satan of the West be destroyed? Should the caliphate be extended across the globe? Nobody had that. Nobody wanted to bat that around. But because these guys are relatable to a certain type of, I don't know, Douthatian sexual freak, all of a sudden their violent outbursts are calls for help instead of cries to be wiped off the face of the earth. But I promised that I wasn't going to read the Douthat article. I said that on Twitter, and I haven't. Virgil, you looked at it. Is there anything worth responding to in it? Yeah, I'm taking your word for it because I'm not reading it.
You want to give it a shot?
Yeah, go for it.
All right. This one's titled The Redistribution of Sex by Ross Douthat. One lesson to be drawn from recent Western history might be this. Sometimes the extremists and radicals and weirdos see the world more clearly than the respectable and moderate and sane.
You laugh at me because I'm different. I laugh at you because you're all the same.
All
Ross
kinds of
Douthat.
phenomena, starting as far back as the Iraq War and the crisis of the euro, but accelerating in the age of populism, have made more sense in the light of analysis by reactionaries and radicals than is portrayed in the organs of establishment opinion. Therefore, I will be resigning because this is all a farce.
You just basically, you wrote yourself out of a gig.
This is part of why there's been so much recent agitation over universities and op-ed pages and other forums for debate. There's general understanding that the ideological mainstream isn't adequate to the moment, but nobody can decide whether that means we need purges or pluralism, a spirit of curiosity and conversation, or a furious war against whichever side you think is evil.
I can decide. Don't fucking put words in my mouth, Ross Douthat. I can decide. I know. The time for jibber jabber is over.
For those more curious than Marshall, one useful path through this thicket is to look at areas where extremists and eccentrics from very different worlds are talking about the same subject.
So ISIS killers and incels, basically, he means.
Such overlap is no guarantee of wisdom, but it's often a sign that there's something interesting going on. Op-ed pages are a land of many contrasts. Which brings me to the sex robots. Well, actually, it brings me to the case of Robin Hanson, a George Mason economist, libertarian, and noted brilliant weirdo. Commenting on the recent terrorist violence in Toronto, Hanson offered this provocation. If we are concerned about the just distribution of property and money, why do we assume that the desire for some sort of sexual redistribution is inherently ridiculous?
Wait a minute. You're a libertarian. You don't credit the redistribution of wealth. So what the fuck are you even talking about? You prima facie refuse to redistribute wealth, but you're going to want to talk about redistributing fucking sex like it's a goddamn commodity, but you won't redistribute any actual commodities?
Well, that's really the essence of libertarianism.
So it's over then. Shut up. He's finished.
After all, he wrote, one might plausibly argue that those with much less access to sex suffer to a similar degree as those with low income, and might similarly hope to gain from organizing around this identity, to lobby for redistribution along this axis, and to at least implicitly threaten violence if their demands are not met.
Hold on a minute. So,
I don't know that you could plausibly argue that, but you could definitely argue it. Professor Walking Stick.
okay, no, hold on a minute, though. He might be doing something else. He might be trying to undermine the case for wealth redistribution by saying, well, if by your logicking it, and saying if you want to redistribute wealth, doesn't that mean you should also want to force women to have sex with these weirdos?
That's what.
And if you don't want to force them to have sex with these weirdos, then you shouldn't redistribute wealth. That is the only way that argument is even
That's probably what
surface
he's doing,
plausible. That's also incredibly stupid, but it's the only way that's even surface plausible.
Well, wealth is a lot like sex. You know, if you don't have any experience with it, you come into it, you either blow through it in 30 seconds or you never have any fun with it.
Well, the tell is him saying, or at least implicitly threaten violence if their demands are not met. No, that's probably the case, but I guess Ross did not realize that. Just took it at face value.
Whiffed on it that hard. That's amazing, Ross. God, you dummy.
Okay.
You little bearded dipshit.
Skipping ahead. A number of the critics I saw engaging with the essay tended to respond the way a normal center-left writer like Weissman engaged with Hanson's thought experiment, by commenting on its weirdness or ideological extremity rather than engaging fully with its substance. But to me, reading them together offers a good case study in how intellectual eccentrics, like socialists and populists in politics, can surface issues and problems that lurk beneath the surface of more mainstream debates. By this I mean that as offensive or utopian the redistribution of sex might sound, the idea is entirely responsive to the logic of late modern sexual life, and its pursuit would be entirely characteristic of a recurring pattern in liberal societies. This is Ross going back to form here. First, because like other forms of neoliberal deregulation, the sexual revolution created new winners and losers, new hierarchies to replace the old ones, privileging the beautiful and rich and socially adept in new ways and relegating others to new forms
because
of loneliness and
rich-
frustration.
Rich and
It's not
attractive people could never get laid before the sexual revolution.
Yeah,
It's true.
it wasn't at all like until about 1963. If you owned two hats, you could fuck anyone.
Yeah.
They had to fuck you.
Fucking
I mean,
Louis XIV was just sadly jerking off into his chamber pot. He could never get
well,
laid.
this is the classic Ross, right? Because it's like if you look at sort of a lot of people's sexual relationships now, you can go, yeah, a lot of these are wrong, and we've commodified so much human interaction that these are awful and unfulfilling for people, like all of modern life is. But his solution is to harken back to a past that never existed.
Yes.
And he goes in the complete wrong direction. Instead of going, maybe we shouldn't commoditize so much of our interaction. Maybe we live in an outstandingly lonely time. Maybe the problem isn't so much promiscuous sex as it is everything is transactional. It's let's make it so that you have to give someone 4 donkeys to get a hand job.
Let's bring back mandatory tithing to the
Yeah.
one true church.
Second, because in this new landscape and amid other economic and technological transformations, the sexes seem to be struggling generally to relate to one another, with social and political chasms opening between them, and not only marriage and family, but also sexual activity itself in recent decline. Third, because the culture's dominant message about sex is still essentially Hefnerian, despite certain revisions attempted by feminists since the heyday of the Playboy
That was the
philosophy.
Armenian guy who invented sexual harassment.
A message that frequency and variety in sexual experience is as close to a summum bonum as the human condition has to offer, that the greatest possible diversity in sexual desires and tastes and identities should not only be accepted, but cultivated, and that virginity and celibacy are at best strange and at worst pitiable states.
I gotta paraphrase friend of the show and frequent guest Jacob Baccarat, who on Twitter pointed out one of the central fallacies of Ross's point there when he says that one of the things about Hefnerian sexual ideology is that it prizes variety. But the thing about Hefner was that his sexual aesthetic and concept was incredibly monotonous. It was basically a million copies of the same person. And Douthat has because he has a literal minded dullard, he thinks, well, a lot of different women, but all women who essentially look the same. Because Hefner was a reactionary figure. He was trying to bring back sort of the pre-World War II gender dynamics that had been disrupted by women entering the workforce. And that Hefnerian sexuality is conservative. And that's part of his inability to reckon with the past the way it actually was, as opposed to the way that he thinks of it in his head.
Well, Hefner for these guys is kind of what like Jay-Z is to more boomer teacut conservatives.
Yes,
which
that's
is to
good.
Say, which is to say, yeah, Jay-Z for the past 10 years has been like, yeah, I set up the investment trust. No taxes, hit bust. Went to the fashion show. Oh no. What's that on the floor? And it just did nothing but, yeah, starting restaurant groups, the best type of furniture you can buy when you have a young child. But if you talk to a conservative about it, because he like met Obama or whatever, they're like, this man, he's talking about his bitches and his hoes and selling crack, which he hasn't done in years. But with Hefner just, for seemingly 150 years, had a magazine where it was like, what if a woman wore a boat captain hat, but you could see her nipples? Just very boring, like the type of thing you jack off to when you're 12 and you're afraid of seeing a vagina or whatever. But they're like, this is the most freaky shit I've ever seen. This bitch is smoking a cigar and she's half naked. What the fuck? Put it away.
Oh my God! And it's right next to the 10 best hi-fis of 1965.
This is too much.
Well, this master narrative inevitably makes both the new inequalities and the decline of actual relationships that much more difficult to bear, which in turn encourages people, as ever under modernity, to place their hope for escape from the costs of one revolution in a further one yet to come, be it political, social, or technological, which will supply, if not the promised utopia, at least some form of redress for the many people that progress has obviously left behind. There is an alternative conservative response, of course, namely that our widespread isolation, unhappiness, and sterility might be dealt with by reviving or adapting older ideas about the virtues of monogamy and chastity and permanence and the special respect owed to the celibate.
Okay.
Yeah, do you remember when your wife was like a slave that you had kids with?
And also, how are you doing that without dismantling capitalism? The force behind every single fucking thing that he's talking about? You're going to allow this rampaging fucking de-atomizing machinery, this alienated economic system that turns people towards its purpose and away from any kind of idea of the self?
No. Ross needs to go on PUA hate and explain to them the virtues of monogamy and chastity.
Well, that's what the alt-right is. The alt-right are guys who went from that PUA to this shit doesn't work pipeline, and then we're like, you know, it does work if we completely return society to how I imagine the 50s were.
But in such an insanely small bore way. At the beginning of this article, he sort of suggests that his entire existence and the existence of a thing like the New York Times op-ed page has essentially been superseded by reality and is pointless. But then he confirms that by, after through his whole article, pointing out the real chasm and a real crisis of identity and in relationships in humans in late capital existence. And his response is tax credits for abstinence-only education.
That's true.
It's like, how do you look into the abyss and come out with that as your fucking response?
That's true. He was all over Rubio adding the fucking the little measly child tax credit to the Trump tax bill, and he's like, "We did it.
Yeah,
we did it, everybody.
Yeah, this is gonna turn it all around, folks. This is gonna make whole what has been broken apart. This is gonna make straight what has been rendered crooked. It's gonna be fucking taxpayer assisted inducements to have a kid in wedlock. Insane gibberish."
Shout out to everyone who doubted me, but we got $200 for new parents. Woo! Family's coming back, baby.
Congratulations. Congratulations. You just had a kid. Here's your $200 check for having a kid. Here's your $10,000 bill for having a child.
Your Rubio
in this hospital.
Your Rubio bucks balance is negative $125.
But I expect the logic of commerce and technology will be consciously harnessed, as already in pornography, to address the unhappiness of incels, be they angry and dangerous or simply depressed and despairing. The left's increasing zeal to transform prostitution into a legalized and regulated, in scare quotes here, sex work, will have this end implicitly in mind. The libertarian and general male fascination, that's redundant, with virtual reality porn and sex robots will increase as those technologies improve. And at a certain point, this is just one long run-on sentence, and at a certain point, without anyone formally debating the idea of a right to sex, right-thinking people will simply come to agree that some such right exists, and that it makes sense to look to some combination of changed laws, new technologies, and evolved mores to fulfill it. Whether sex workers and sex robots can actually deliver real fulfillment is another matter, but that they will eventually be asked to do it in service of a redistributive goal that for now seems creepy or misogynist or radical feels pretty much inevitable.
So he's saying that the dumb, like Ben Shapiro take on universal healthcare, which is that you force doctors to work at gunpoint for free, will happen if we legalize prostitution.
Yeah, essentially. Because he wants to
really went for it this week, Ross. He wants
to blame this hyper accelerating capitalist sort of endpoint where people have essentially been stretched into their individual fucking molecules, like somebody being pulled into a black hole. He wants to turn that into the fault of the 60s cultural shift. He wants to blame that on birth control pills.
My culture, my Western patriarchal culture is so strong. It's the strongest ever. We never should have left it. By the way, it was destroyed by guys with bowl cuts smoking dirt weed and going, hey, can you give me a groovy hand job?
It's just he's just a sad wizard who lives in a D&D realm where a bunch of dirty hippies cast sexual promiscuity and then did like a dex roll. Is that a thing? I don't know. Is that?
Yeah,
I don't
dex
think
roll.
you would use a dex roll.
I don't
there,
know.
but okay.
What if you're finger blasting?
They cast
Oh,
a
well-
spell for sexual promiscuity, and then they
probably be an aura.
an aura of sexual promiscuity, and then they rolled what do they roll?
I mean, it depends, but
Oh.
generally, I mean, I think if the aura would last a certain period of time, you'd have to renew it, or perhaps to use magic spell points in order to sustain it.
Okay,
Not me, dude. They've been saying my aura lasts forever.
The short answer is it depends what class you are.
all right. Well,
All right.
okay.
I'm a fucker. Yeah. So in the game, I got clones, and they've never had sex, but they're clones of me, so they're pretty good at sex.
Okay, so he thinks that happened.
Yeah.
As opposed to capital acceleration be capitally accelerating. That's why, as I said before, I will always respect the Nick Land psychopaths
Yeah.
who identify the actual vector and just say that's good, and we should all cease. We should want to cease to be. We should want singularity, and we should want to basically get rid of humanity
What I don't understand
instead of trying to split the difference and just basically want to, for the point of feeling right. Like at the end of the day, guys like Douthat, they don't actually care if anything changes. They just want to be on record as of being the soft, quiet, correct voice of decency who is not listened to in the howling, profane public sphere that's been cheapening by the day. They just want to be that. They don't actually care if anything changes.
Well, what I don't understand is how are men worse off now post-sexual revolution, or how are the incel men worse off? Other than that, they're more envious, I guess.
Yeah, the old path for incel men was that you worked in a little brick shed on a rich guy's property, and they're like, oh, yeah, that guy wipes my donkey's asses, and he's a simpleton. It was that you were a Torgo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you were alone in your Torgo-ness. Now all the Torgos get to go online and assure each other that it's not your Torgo-ness that's the problem. It's the women. They all got together and decided that they're only going to distribute their sexual goodies to the Chads and going to prevent you from having it, even though you are imposing upon them the exact same lookist standards that you're blaming them for having on you.
Yeah.
That's the thing I never got about those motherfuckers. They are mad at hot women for only wanting to be with hot men, but would never consider being with someone who they would consider less attractive.
So the general objection is that women now have higher standards and more reproductive freedom, and not, they're being in the workforce. They don't, have to rely on marrying an incel man.
Also, like, that first part isn't even true. You don't spend enough time around women if you really think that. You follow any woman and you look at her timeline, Alan Dershowitz could get it.
Oh my God, the Noid could crush my
Oh
pussy.
my God.